All right. So again, welcome to ADUs for Independent Living. Tonight we have both of our small home advisors. We have Jeff Bowman. He's our Maine small home advisor. So everyone in Maine, if you decide to build, you will be working alongside Jeff. And then we also have Tim O'Reilly. He's our Massachusetts small home advisor. So all of our, what do you call it? Massachusettsans?
Right.
You will be working with Tim. So at any point, you guys can get started.
Wonderful. Avril, thank you for that great introduction. And thanks everyone for coming tonight. It is really great to do that initial poll and sort of hear where everyone's at and what people are thinking about. Our goals tonight are to cover a lot of those topics. We could talk here for 3 hours, but we only get an hour with you. So we will try to cover everything. And Jeff and I love your questions. So please ping them in the Q&A and keep them coming. We have our sort of set agenda to try to give you a real juicy nugget of knowledge tonight about multi-generational living and about all the experience that we've gained over the last 4 years building for folks across New England. So we're really excited to share that. Let's jump in. All right, let's do the slideshow. So we're back here at ADUs. You guys know that. That's why you showed up here tonight. But who could benefit? And this is one we've learned from experience. We've built for folks in a bunch of different scenarios. A lot of people are downsizing. They're thinking about 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. They're thinking about folks in their life who have disabilities, who have long-term health needs that they're hoping to address now and to be prepared. They're thinking about their parents and consolidating their family. Both, hey, moving someone across the country to take care of my parents, but maybe we also have young children, and how can we all live together and help out? We've also built a lot of homes for folks that have adult children with disabilities. That's one that's near and dear to my heart, and we've done a lot of projects. We'll talk about it later with the Home Modification Loan Program, which enables folks who are elderly or disabled in Massachusetts to get state grant money to build an ADU. So our goals tonight are threefold. The key three is, how do we think about ADUs when it comes to accessibility? Where are they going to be located? And what are key design considerations of how this home is going to work for you now and long-term? Financing is key. It seems to these days always be the elephant in the room. Like, we know the need is there and the housing shortage and crisis, but how are we going to make this project work? Because the numbers do have to pencil out. And the other part, when we're thinking about multi-generational living, is the legality and the legacy. So how is this going to work for your family now and when your situation changes? And just talking a little about the legal and financial implications to think about at this early stage of design and planning.
Yeah, so when it comes to design, you know, I'm thinking about some of the customers that I work with now that are design customers and people that have built and are building with us. And then we also work a lot with folks that are just trying to gather information and are maybe some of the folks that are tuning in tonight, just trying to get an understanding of what it is that we do, and they have an idea of what they're wanting to do. So when thinking about everybody's circumstance and how that applies to designing the living spaces, there's a couple things to think about. So first would be accessibility. So what are accessibility issues, both in a physical fashion, and then also what are maybe some accessibility issues with your specific property? That, you know, two different ways to look at accessibility. But when we're talking about aging in place or multi-generational living, you know, there are things to think about in terms of actually accessing the ADU. A lot of folks are looking to maybe downsize from a large home. that maybe they don't need the whole upstairs anymore. Maybe they really would like to have a single floor living experience. Maybe there are some mobility issues. So when we're designing our ADUs, we're not only thinking about how you're going to be able to access the ADU on the property, because that's going to be an important aspect, but then also while building the ADU and the different rooms and how you're going to be using it, what sort of accessibility things should we plan for that are immediate and then also for the future. So yeah, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, these design themes come up at every sort of step of the way. Is initially when you're looking at a site, how are we going to get outside to inside? And once we get inside, in each of those spaces, kitchen, living room, bedroom, things even like storage, how deep is the closet? How far can you reach? Do we have trouble reaching up? What are some ways that we can modify the home and the layout to fit those now and in the future? A good example, we have a lot of photographic examples we're going to look at, but even now I'm working with some clients and they're designing a house for their mother, and we're taking all into consideration her needs now for accessibility, but in the future. So a stackable washer and dryer works for her now. She has no issues reaching up or bending down, but we're planning space that currently can be used for storage, but in the future they could unhinge those washers and dryers and they can be right side by side. So if she was ever in a wheelchair, she'd still have the ability to do her laundry independently. But we're planning now, where is that space and those hookups, and thinking about how that space will be used.
Yeah, that actually makes me think of there's a customer that we have in Portland. It's actually two brothers. The older brother is going to be moving into the property with the younger brother, and so they're thinking about accessibility issues that are current, since he is the older brother, but then also things that might be developing down the line as well for the older brother, and with that as well, accessibility from where they would be parking their car and how they actually even just get to the ADU. How do you get to the front door? How do you get up and into the house? So there's a lot of things to think about with accessibility. Downsizing ADU. Yeah, you got it.
I was going to say, just as part of our job, as we're thinking about, holistically, the multi-generational living, is how is someone who's moving into your backyard or your side yard, how are they still going to make this feel like home? And they're often have a lot of items in their life and things that make home feel like home. And we want to make sure that this new space can accommodate those items now, and even thinking accessibility in the future. How are these two ideas going to work? So often we're looking at furniture. Where do people have furniture storage needs or seating needs that work for them now, but maybe down the line when they do need a little extra space around the bed or in the navigating the bedroom, or they need plenty of storage now in the bathroom, but if they need a more accessible bathroom, they can move a piece of furniture to then navigate that space. And as they're looking at this project, how can they still continue to do the things that they love to do? We're working with a woman right now, and she's an artist. So she has a whole room dedicated to her art supplies. And as she's thinking about building this house and moving into her daughter's yard, the quality of life for her to be able to have the space to make art is paramount. So we're designing a space for her art table, a space for shelves for all her storage, and a utility sink where she can clean out her brushes and still have this be a functional art space for her. Space to entertain is important, Jeff. We're going to look at one of your former clients, and they, for example, they knew they were going to entertain grandkids, and they were going to be a destination in the summer. So they needed a big covered porch that they could screen in to host. So oftentimes people are worried, I'm not going to have enough space to host in my kitchen or to host Thanksgiving. But as we're looking at that space, every square foot counts. To say maybe you can have a 4-person table that expands to 6. You're only going to do that 2 times a year, but we'll make sure you have enough space to do that. And storage is huge. So storage works And in a small house, it can get cluttered quickly. So you got to have it where you need it. And we're often thinking entry closets, right when you come in. Where can there be a catch-all? When you're doing laundry, how far away is your linens? Where are you folding clothes? Where are you storing things? And then sort of going back to tools and supplies. If you're a chef in your kitchen, let's make sure we have plenty of storage. Let's make sure that storage drawers pull out of cabinetry. So as you age, things aren't getting lost or it's purgatory in the back of those cabinets. Everything is still accessible. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a lot of
One
work,
thing I have
a lot of work to talk through downsizing and
Yeah, it is.
accessibility. But we have this thoughtful process where we're looking at what do you have now? What do you use now? What are your concerns? And we can sort of punch all those into a funnel. And at the bottom of that, we're going to figure out the design that works for you and maximize the square footage that you're allowed.
Yeah, with dealing with multi-generational living, looking at downsizing through that lens. So we have thinking of a customer I have right now where they're attaching the ADU. The mother's going to move into the daughter's property and attached ADU. She's really concerned about her storage. She has a limit. The town has a limit to how big the ADU can be. And so right now we're trying to figure out where is she going? Where's mom going to put all of her storage is a big concern. One aspect that is going to be, we're actually doing two things. We're going to build her a nice big basement. We have a fairly tight budget, but we're making sure we have room for a basement. That's going to be site specific, and there's a lot to do with that, especially with attaching an ADU. But those are the due diligence that we do. So she's going to have a basement to be able to store stuff, but then she's also going to be able to use her daughter's main house as storage as well, as needed. So that was a big, we've been going back and forth, and that's where we're at the moment, but trying to figure out the balance between what a budget point is versus, we have a maximum square footage. So therefore we have, there's just a lot to deal with when you're looking at an ADU and this multi-generational lens, but downsizing is an important one because you don't really realize how much stuff you have until you have to move, and then it all comes out.
And a basement's one great option. Another one people often sometimes defer to is a garage, even if it's a single car garage. There's obviously covered parking, which in our New England climate comes in handy, but it's also another sort of catch-all if there's larger storage needs. And the third that we look at, and it's generally the most straightforward, is if you have a shed. Maybe that's the kind of storage you need. It's at a lower price point. It's also far more flexible when we're looking at where is the ADU going to go in a yard. Thinking about site considerations. Does a basement work for the site? Does it work for our budget? Same with a garage and same with a shed. Or as we go through that design process, looking at, hey, maybe we'll dedicate an extra 10 or 15 square feet to increase this closet, or to have a space for future built-ins, or look at furniture options.
Yeah, a couple projects we've done here in Portland area, Portland, Maine, we've actually added a lofted space above, say, a bedroom or an entry space. So that's an option as well, where you have a lofted area where you can use it as storage, and that helps get things through zoning. But anyways, we're spending too much time on this. We can keep this going.
We could talk for hours. A lot of experience, but it really comes down to.
Sorry to interrupt you. We do have some more people that have just joined us. So if you did just hop on, we do have the chat closed, but go ahead and throw your questions into the Q&A box, and we may not answer them immediately, but by the end of tonight, we will go through them. And also we are recording the event. So by the beginning of next week, you'll have access to this video. Just want to throw that out there one more time.
Great. So holistically, we can get into the nuts and bolts on what's on the inside, but it really does start with each specific property and your needs. So I hear this all the time. I know you do, Jeff. It's like, hey, I'm really excited to be close to my children or my grandchildren or my friends, but I do still want some privacy. So the close but not too close is heard really often. So this is a great example where the main house with their views and their parking, we were able to find a spot where the ADU is going to have its own driveway. It's going to be sort of tucked into one part of the property. They're going to be together. They're going to be close, but they're not roommates, right? They're going to be neighbors on the same property. In that same vein, when we're designing and thinking, what are the needs of the client? Maybe having their own separate driveway doesn't work. So how can we look at the proximity of the ADU to the main house, make sure there's still symmetry between the two structures, and that it's not too blocky or too tight, but maybe that is going to be closer to a garage where there's covered parking, or to an existing parking area, or if we know, mobility concerns down the road are going to be diminishing, maybe we want to be closer to that house where there's pathways, and you can just be closer when it comes to care. So a lot to consider there. That's site specific, but you do need to look at the whole picture as we plan. And the other piece we see here is utilities. Where's the electric service, the water, and the sewer or septic? That's sort of more putting our construction hat on, but that is helpful too when we're looking at how to be close, but not too close.
Yep.
This is a project that we were working on out in Western Mass. And in this case, a key parameter was accessibility now and versus later. So she potentially in the future could be in a wheelchair. And so we needed to plan for that. So we had some landscaping stairs in the front. These were done with pressure treated lumber and a compacted stone in between. And this was actually a softer surface for her to walk up that felt better. But we also planned and had a contingency where, based on the site and the slope, you can see there's a lot of steps there. We still needed a ramp. So out the back of her house, we were able to figure out a way to get an ADA ramp to come up. So the house works for her now. She can park the car and walk up the stairs and go in the front door. But if she ever needs to, she can wheel out the back door and work her way down to the parking area.
And we do have a
Great
great video of that house, the full tour on the inside too on our YouTube that I'll include in that resource link too.
Yeah, and Libby's really happy in her house. It was really great tour.
Happy
Happy in general.
Love that.
So thinking about close but not too close, what's there? How are these two structures going to play off of each other? And what sort of common space might we want to access? On the right here, the pool was on the left here, excuse me. The pool is a central feature, right? You can't avoid this gorgeous pool in the backyard. So when we were designing to play off the main structure, we added sort of a ranch style porch and that roof line, and it really helped the ADU blend into the backyard and open up into that pool and not feel like it was an isolated structure. It also, the way we positioned it on the lot, had sort of private views. So you couldn't really look out the main house into the ADU, but they were both communally looking over the pool. And what's not pictured is on the back of that ADU, there is a ramp. So the brother had some accessibility concerns and he needed to be able to get into the house. He didn't need a full ADA ramp like is here. And so we worked with him to make sure that he still had a ramp that worked so he could access the house, but he didn't need a full ADA ramp. So there is some compromise there in terms of level of finish and cost and making sure it suits your needs. This other house here, we did out in Florence, and this is, you can see back down in the backyard, but we knew with our L design, there was going to be this neat little nook, and the main house, they love to sit out on the porch, and we wanted to have this space in between feel common. So they planted it with gardens, they did the stone patio, and it really had the two structures play off of each other nicely. But being close and not too close, sometimes we'll design with some privacy in mind. So this was a house we did in East Hampton, and the mother knew that, she's moving into her daughter's backyard, being close to the grandkids were her goals, but she did like to have some privacy and to be able to have her own little patio area. So in the nook of this L, We positioned the house on the lot where our L shape created that nook. It was private. You couldn't see the main house, and she'll have a space where she can have her patio furniture, and any guests who are arriving will walk down the walkway and it'll open up into this neat little private nook. So everyone's a little different. Every lot's a little different. Everyone's needs are different, but we're going to figure out in that design phase how to accomplish those goals. Looking on the inside, this is one where we were planning for now and for later. And so we didn't need fully ADA accessible features, but we did want to plan. This was going to be the house she's going to live in for a long, long time. So where can we look and make sure that this is going to function for her? The key were doorways. So we see 210 doorways. We also see a pocket door. And then in our bathroom here, this is one of our accessible bathroom layouts where we have extra space around the toilet and in front of the shower. And our door clears where we can have space in front of the sink. So someone in a walker could navigate the space, or someone with a caretaker could navigate this space. There's wall space for blocking in ample locations, so she can feel stable both in the shower, but also coming around the corner. And likewise, in her bedrooms, she has open space around the bed, so she can orient that exactly how she needs to get in and out of bed comfortably, to get in and around the room, and to access her closets as well. And in the open concept kitchen living room, knowing that she wanted flexibility down the road, she decided to go with a furniture island. So she could put a piece of furniture there. She can have that central island that looks great, feels great, and gives a lot of flexibility and functionality in the kitchen. But down the road, if that island doesn't work for her, she'll have the space. She can move that out of the way and accommodate what she might need.
We did have some questions too. Someone asked if we have any after videos of walkthrough of interiors for finished ADUs. And so I will include those links of the brown house. We also have the house with all the wildflowers and the pool house. We have all those are on our YouTube channel. If you don't want to wait till tomorrow and you want some extra things to watch after this, you can go to our YouTube channel and see those. We also had a question, is the well and septic typically shared with an ADU?
It's a great question. Yeah. Every site is a little bit different. We're working in both Mass and Maine. So there are some differences there. Typically, if you can share them and the infrastructure supports it, it often makes sense. But it's also thinking holistically, what are the goals now and what are the goals long term? So the house we were just looking at, they were on town water and they were close enough. It made sense. Let's connect. Projects that are on a septic, it really can vary. What is in the ground? What can it support? And how far away is it? Because as you're looking at those three factors, there may be additional costs associated with connecting, where then it might tip the scales to say, hey, can it have its own separate system? But we'll work with you on your property of what makes the most sense, looking at it both from a construction perspective to make sure those utilities can serve the unit, and then cost-wise, what really is going to work. Yeah. For example, I'm working on a client now in Northborough, and she's allowed to have a new tap to the city sewer and a new tap to the city water. She could also connect to the main house. So we had our engineering team look at it, the town engineer look at it, and both options were presented. It's 10 to 17 grand to connect to the street. It's more like 7 or 8 grand to connect to what's there. But both options are presented. We reviewed both. And from there, it's a decision that she'll make of what she feels the most comfortable with.
Yeah, that's great.
We also have a lot of financial questions, so we'll save those for that financing piece too, and some municipality questions, which we'll answer at the end.
Great. Yeah, and Jeff and I love talking about this stuff. So we probably won't be able to answer all of your specific questions to your specific town, but shoot us an email and we'll do some research and get back to you.
Yeah, we do love talking about it. We as many of these have gone, we can sometimes get a little too caught up on the front half of the presentation and kind of have to run through the back end. So we'll try to keep things moving along here, but our information will be up and happy to look at everybody's personal situation if you shoot us an email at the end of all of this. So I'll take a turn here.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. We can, Tim and I can get a little long on talking about it. It's just because we there's so much to talk about and we just care about talking about it. So but anyways, back to thinking about design here. So I was able to find a couple bathrooms that we are currently building and that kind of differ between a fully ADA compliant versus accessible. So working with clients, there are some clients that really want to have a fully ADA compliant bathroom or entire ADU. And there are a lot of folks that are looking for not a small bathroom. They want it to be accessible. They want it to be able to be function with a walker or with assistance in the future, but they don't necessarily need everything in the book that is ADA compliancy for their home. So, that's a conversation we'll have with you about how you want to use your space. But when we are dealing with an ADA bathroom, there are certain requirements we have to have. The biggest one being this 5-foot diameter ADA. So you can be able to spin around a wheelchair is the thought there. So there are certain design elements that we'll take into consideration with that. Whereas, a nice, more spacious, you could pretty comfortably fit 2 folks in this bathroom on the right. With a walk-in shower, there's a low lip there, and there's a lot of design features that were put into this to be able to have it be accessible and used for somebody as they're aging.
And the functionality too of now versus later, often grab bars is the thing we're always preparing for. So reinforcing the tub, blocking in the wall, but maybe you just don't need those now. Well, great. In the wall, whenever you need it, it's ready to be converted. But we're thinking about those pieces now. And similarly around the toilet, how can that be navigated? Where can there be bars for an assist? In both of these places, that could work. All right, more examples. We always have more. This is one we worked on the South Shore, and 93-year-old mom was moving into the backyard. And even though with the grade change in the backyard, you can see it dropping away, we had to have several steps up to the home. On the other side, there's a shared deck. So she's often not leaving the house. She's in her home. And if she needs to go into the main house, into the kitchen, she's out her slider door, single level to the main house. And this is what really made sense for her and for her family. And long term, their son was planning to move in here. And so he would have his own private way to leave out and then have a pathway to the front to where he could park. Jeff, this is one you worked on. This is that one where they needed some outdoor space for hosting. So they did that nice, spacious porch that they could screen in down the road.
Yep. Truly multi-generational family dwelling here. I think this was the folks that we built this ADU for. They grew up on this property, and I think it had been in their family for at least a few generations before that. So their daughter lives on the property, and their, I guess technically niece, their sister's daughter, lives on the property as well. So she put the ADU right in between both of their houses. There's still plenty of distance between everybody, but she really needed to have this common space. We were constrained a little bit due to the town and to budget restraints of the size of the actual floor plan of the ADU. But one item that was not negotiated was the screened porch here. That unfortunately we didn't get a finished photo of the screened aspect of it, but you can see what we were going for there.
So this is just one example of a floor plan where we were thinking about accessibility. So they're detached, they're in the backyard, they're close, but not too close. This is that bathroom we looked at earlier, where they went with actually a 0 threshold shower versus a 3.5, 4-inch fiberglass pan. And their goal was to live close to their daughter, to have an extra room, to be able to host guests, and have that open concept kitchen living room. We could talk about this one all day, so I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
But their case, Jeff, do you want to talk about how they situated this just briefly and how they thought about
Yeah.
accessibility?
Yep. So they were thinking about, so they're going to share a driveway. This is a lot that can actually be split. Technically, it's 2 lots. And so when we were designing this and we were thinking about utilities, we were thinking about, hey, do we want to, what's the best way to think about being able to do the most with this property in the long term? But what we ended up doing was going with a split driveway. We ended up having their own privacy. So they have a back door that they can, with a sunroom that they can actually end up going in and out of, and then they have a front door that they can go in and out of. And there's plenty of windows that they can look at each other in the house, but we really try to be pretty mindful of giving everybody their own autonomy on the property, from the main house to the ADU. So I'm really excited for this project. It'll be built this spring.
And this is one where we took one of our smaller designs, sort of around 500 square feet, 550 square feet. And how could we make this more ADA and more accessible? So this is one of these bathrooms that we looked at earlier, where we have this diameter if they needed to navigate in a wheelchair. Doorways are a little bit tricky. So in this one, you'll notice a couple barn doors, and that's really to get that widest opening possible. And given that this was a 1-bedroom unit, the barn door provided enough privacy for them. We were also thinking about getting around and navigating that bedroom, having closet doors that can pull out of the way, and then still having sort of a private desk nook. And in that 500 square feet, what can sort of be a functional kitchen? Everything is close, that galley style where it's on one side or the other side, and there's still plenty of space to enter, navigate around a table, and flow through that smaller 500 square feet. And still have, again, you see storage where you need it, laundry in the bathroom. And they knew exactly what furniture was going to get in here. So we mocked it up for them, made sure it was going to fit. And then knowing as well, hey, accessibility to the yard.
Yep. Definitely part of the design phase is figuring out not only the flow, but then also, are you a master chef, or are you just trying to have a pretty minimal kitchen? Maybe take square footage from the bathroom and give it to the kitchen, or vice versa. So after talking with the customer, this was a layout that worked really well for them.
And I knew too, looking at this kitchen, pedestal sink is another one, or if you know you're going to be in a wheelchair and need to roll up to it, to have a little extra space under that sink was helpful. And we'll just note our blocking around the toilet and the shower, and really making sure this is going to be a long-term space for them. Do I hear questions?
Yeah, there's a question. Do you ever put in elevators to gain access to basements or a possible second floor, or allow room to add an elevator later?
That's a neat question. Elevators have become a bit more popular. We as a company have not done them. When we're designing and thinking about basements or second floors, we're typically just looking at staircases. But we've done some designs where we're thinking about lifts, more so a couple steps versus a whole floor. But I wouldn't say, if it's something you're thinking about, we could design a space where it could accommodate it possibly down the road, but we personally don't install them. Yeah,
happy to have the conversation. And if you're bringing, some some guidance as to how you think that the elevator might be able to be implemented in the overall design, we can talk with you about that. But generally, that's not something that we would do. And elevators can be quite expensive from my research. So
it's one of those, I've been asked about it a lot. And oftentimes we'll try to look at why are we thinking about an elevator in the first place? And let's sort of peel back the layers of the onion here and see what is it. A lot of times it's, man, I need that storage in the basement. It's like, okay, how can we still do single story living? You can get everything that you need now. And for the price tag of an elevator, let's find a storage solution that works.
Yeah.
And regarding bathrooms, is it possible to do a full wet bath? And is that ADA compliant?
We have done full wet baths. I'm not sure the exact translation to ADA, but we've done, I know at least one that we've done here out in Massachusetts. We weren't designing specifically for ADA, so they didn't have a vanity that you could roll up to, but they did have the full wet bath.
Yeah.
Great. Jeff, this was one that you were working on, and I know there was a lot of consideration here about how this family was going to live together on one property.
Yep. Certainly. So on the bottom photo on the left, you can see the large house, and then the site sketch on the right, you can see how large that main house there is. The house is from the 1700s, and it's been in their family the entire time, which is pretty cool. So what we were thinking about doing is adding to the general homestead that they have here, while still having its own independence. So it's actually a case where a younger family is moving into the ADU, and the grandparents live in the main house. They'll probably be doing that seasonally for a few seasons, and then probably end up moving in. The plan is to move back to Maine full time within a certain time period. So for the time being, they'll have this nice 800 square foot ADU with a nice screened porch, and it'll have its own privacy and personal walkway between the buildings. But you're really not. They're fortunate where they have a fair amount of acreage, so we didn't need to be right on top of each other. So both homes are facing the street, but they will maintain general aesthetic and common walkway, and they actually share some utilities as well. With this house too, they were a little worried with the 1700 septic system that they had going on. It's still working, so during the design phase, we actually ended up designing a septic system that would be able to house future expansion from the main house as needed. Just trying to plan ahead with this, and just the generations that we're talking about here. So
great. So financing, we definitely need to touch on this, and we've learned a lot over the years of how do you make this work, and how do families consolidate and figure out how to pay to build an ADU. So what we're seeing across generations here is parents, both aging parents and younger children who need housing. So they're in different demographics, but the demand is there. So how do we make this work? On our end, construction costs over the past 3 or 4 years have gotten out of control. So we've worked hard to try to address these, but the reality, this is a beautiful square that we built in 2019 pre-COVID for $175. Really affordable, 2-bedroom, new construction, energy efficient, but now that's around $270. So the costs there have gone up 54%, and that smiley face or frowny face rather says it all. So same great construction, energy efficient, low bills, but the costs have just gotten much higher. Looking out, depending on your situation, the alternatives have also gotten more expensive. So condos across the market, depending on where you live, we've seen those prices go through the roof. Small starter homes and ones that are accessible that might fit your needs, those two. There's not many out there anymore, and the ones that are have a pretty price tag on them. And then retirement communities as well. We just finished a home for a woman who was living in a retirement community, and they 1 month the next raised her rent $1,000 and said, if you don't like it, you can leave. So I don't, that's the only story I know. But it is unfortunate out there. So the way we've been tackling it, we've got a couple alternatives, but it's important to address sort of the elephant in the room.
Do either of you know what the return on investment at resale for these type of properties is with an ADU? Or if there's any data about it somewhere?
I would reach out to Jeff or I to talk about your region. It'll be sort of region specific, market specific. So that's a real detailed question, but reach out to Jeff or I and we can chat more about the details.
It varies drastically on how you are using it, where you are, a lot of details. Yeah, we'd happily talk with you about it.
Yeah. So going into the costs, why are things so expensive? How do we break down a project? What are these real costs? 40% is the home. The utility and foundation is around 30%. The site work is about 15%. And then planning, design, and permitting and engineering is about another 15%. So all of those have contributed, have changed. Everyone heard about lumber prices and materials. That's gone up a bit. Concrete at one point was more expensive. Utilities have gotten a lot more expensive. Site work, folks are charging us more. It depends. What else do we have in here? Tree work, other things that come up, that hasn't changed a bunch. And then planning, design, and permitting, we control our fees, so we try to stabilize those. But engineering and some of those costs have gone up a bit as well. When looking at small homes, though, when we're building a 500 square foot or 700 square foot home, if you're starting to calculate the price per square foot, it doesn't look great, especially when you look out in the market. But that is breaking down these different costs. If we're doing a foundation that's 100 square foot bigger, we're not adding that much more cost. So it's sort of a false metric. When we're looking at our houses, sometimes if we're building 800 square feet and looking at going to 900, our cost per square foot more is only 130 to 150. So it's really low, but we have a lot of sunken costs with utilities and foundations and things like that. But on the back end, with our new houses, 0 to no maintenance, utilities are much cheaper. We're really well insulated, and it's pretty easy to make net zero. So you could eliminate those utility bills. And then taxes as well. Every town's a little different about how they view these from a tax perspective. Sometimes they're taxed as a 2-family, sometimes they're taxed on the additional square footage. But compared to a standalone property, you're typically looking at cheaper taxes.
Yeah, I think in general, looking at that question, not to stay on it for too long, but you really got to think about what it is that you're looking to get out of building the house or getting an ADU or taking on a project like this. And instead of getting caught up in what a cost per square foot is, if you're trying to build small, rather than unnecessarily excess square footage in a larger house, it's just not the best metric. Cost per square foot is not the best metric for taking on a more nuanced build, such as an ADU or multi-generational living. So
yeah, and in these multiple generational situations, it's what are sort of these other benefits? I know, Jeff, your mom was talking about, hey, I'd love to build an ADU in your backyard and come see your grandchildren. And I know your daycare costs are not cheap. So where are those ways there could be some synergies? Like the woman I was talking about earlier, she moved into her son's backyard, and her care network is right there. So she's no longer paying a care facility. She's right there in their backyard. And also travel, consolidating families, whether they're coming from across the country or from the town next door. But all that adds up and everyone's right there, which is great. Something I was thinking about recently as I was shoveling my driveway in our big storm is some of that, shared infrastructure, and having everyone together. You're not paying multiple, plowing bills or sometimes cable bills or things like that. So there's some other smaller savings there. But how does this work? How do you pay for it? Do you need to be on the ADU's mortgage? The answer is yes. So if an adult child is planning to move into the parent's backyard, they need to look at how might they get their names on a deed or on a mortgage if they're going to spend a chunk of change to move into the backyard, and vice versa. I'm building for a woman right now. Her son is going to be put on her mortgage, and then they're going to do a HELOC, and they're figuring out that cash piece to make it work.
That was an old image. That 3.875% interest rate looks pretty good right now.
Yeah, we should update that. Stop teasing. But how do you do it? Again, looking at those construction costs is how do we figure out how to pay that note? So oftentimes, less these days with rates, people are cashing out and refinancing. When rates are 3%, it was a much more attractive option. Some people are looking at second mortgages or construction financing. If they're building on a standalone lot, they're looking more for the construction financing. These days, a home equity line of credit or a HELOC, if you have a lot of equity in your home, that is a great way to go get a source of funds to pay for your ADU. Again, refinancing is less attractive with higher rates, but may also work, especially if an adult children or whoever's moving into the backyard doesn't have a way to access capital. You could come up with a payment plan together. Speak with a lawyer or however it goes. This is a category that we're always sort of looking to add more to in terms of local grants and state programs. If you're in Massachusetts, I highly encourage you to look up the HMLP, the Home Modification Loan Program. If you're in Salem, Mass, the city is offering incentives. Down here on Cape Cod, there are some local nonprofits who were offering funds to build ADUs. Unfortunately, those funds have dried up or been reallocated. But hopefully other towns, Auburn, Maine, Kittery, Maine, hopefully state and municipalities figure out that ADUs are going to be a great housing solution, and start providing and putting more resources and funding towards it. The other two listed here aren't great in terms of interest rates, but a personal loan, sometimes if there's a small gap, that might be a way to go about it. Or if you, again, we wouldn't recommend it, you could close the gap. Maybe you have some savings tucked away.
I have a question for you. Actually, I'm wondering if it's coming up later, but why do the tenants need to be added to the mortgage?
Yeah, so I'll speak from experience on this one we're working on in Northborough. If the son is going to own the main house, he needs to be brought onto the deed. And in the shuffle of him selling his house and moving mortgages, that's how they've decided to go about it. Have you experienced that at all, Jeff, with consolidating?
I was going to say the slide that we had before where the homeowner needs to be on the ADU mortgage, that is because it's the homeowners, the mortgage, the property owners' property. And so they're adding another, so the person that owns the primary structure needs to be on the ADUs generally. It needs to be on that mortgage note as well. Doesn't necessarily need to be the other way around. You don't need to have who's going to be living in the ADU be on the mortgage loan. It depends on what your personal situation is and how you're going to end up using the ADU. So you could use it as a short-term rental, or you could have it for your mother to live in. But the property owner needs to be on the note, on both notes. So I don't know if that's what they were trying to get at, but that's how I'm taking that.
This is a key as well, as you're thinking about it. Oftentimes, if someone's selling an asset, building an ADU in the backyard, How does that work when you're looking at the IRS? This will be viewed as a gift, a very big gift at that. What you need to do, oops, let me go back here. You'll need to fill out IRS form 709. And so you'll fill out this form. If your estate is worth less than around 12 million, this gift will be a part of your lifetime exclusion. So you really shouldn't have to worry about it beyond filling out the correct paperwork to report this gift to the IRS. Say, hey, I'm spending this chunk of change. This is going to be a gift to my son. I'm building this in his backyard, adding that value. But just fill out the proper form. Oh, legal considerations. We can't skip that. Everyone's situation is a little bit different. And so often as we're talking with families, thinking about downsizing, thinking about if an ADU is right, we may point them towards a lawyer because even if you're family and you love each other, let's make sure we have a good plan set up. An example that comes to mind is a woman we built for in Harwich. She's longtime friends with her college friends who own a property in Harwich. Well, she wanted to retire to Cape Cod. So she sold her condo. They figured out an ADU is possible. I want to live in an ADU on your property. You want me to live in an ADU on your property. And how are we going to make this work? They first consulted with us. Yes, it's possible. We can build it. Here's a ballpark budget. Then we said, if you're going to do this, you should go speak to a lawyer, make an agreement. How is this going to work when things change in the future? They did that. They said, we're ready to move forward. We said, okay, let's design, let's plan this space, and let's get you moved in. So you want to think about who owns the ADU, what are your relationships like now, but also plan for the future. And then how is rent going to work? Some bylaws these days in the ADU sphere require it to be rented. We're building one right now, the set day I came from in Truro. They require a yearly lease to be signed and on file in the building department. So her 92-year-old mother is going to sign a lease. She's going to pay rent to her daughter, and that will be on file in town hall. So sometimes you need to do that. Other times we're building for folks, their adult children are going to move into the backyard. They said, I can go out and I can pay in the market $1,800 in rent. Why don't I pay $1,800 in rent to you? We'll build in the backyard. And then long-term legacy. Me and my brother are going to own this property with 2 houses on it. We'll be roommates now, and down the road, they'll have to do Rochambeau to see who gets to live in the ADU. But so there are legal considerations out there. I'd say in general, it's not a project killer, but it is something you need to do your due diligence on and to think about.
For everybody's own personal, everybody's own experience and circumstance is going to vary. And Tim and I have a lot of experience in helping people figure out what makes sense and asking questions that might provoke some good thought for the customers. So you can always reach out to Tim or myself on any of these topics. I'm the one up here in Maine, and Tim's the one down there in Mass, and we're always happy to talk ADUs and multi-generational living or anything ADU related. So
we do still have some more questions too, and if you have questions, we're going to go through these last couple, and if you have some you want to add to the list, we're going to go a few minutes over because we started about 5 to 10 minutes a little late. So just to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to ask anything that they had. How long on average does it usually take to build a complete ADU?
That's a great question. So there's a couple pieces to look at. To set good expectations up front, I tell people about 12 months from when you reach out to us and do a feasibility study is a good window. 8 months is pushing it. 10 months is reasonable, but 12 months really gives us the time to do our due diligence, to design the house and to get it right. And then to narrow down our construction process and execute in a concise timeline. So 12 months is great. Life doesn't always work like that. We've had folks who come to us and say, here's my situation. This is changing rapidly. I need some housing. And this is actually a great photo, Jeff, right? Where they needed to move in. And this was one of our fastest ADU builds to date. They did the design process. They laid out their house. We did the budget. We made sure it all worked. We put it into production. The house arrived 3 or 4 months later, and our team was able to finish it in a really expedited timeline. So everyone's situation's different. Good expectations is about a year. That allows us to do the right thing and design and do that fixed pricing, but we can't expedite it because we know that life isn't that simple. We don't always have that much time.
And I'm going to ask a question just because 29% of people that attended tonight said they don't know how to get started. And you keep mentioning feasibility studies. If someone is thinking about potentially wanting to build or still has questions or doesn't know where to begin, where should they start?
If you're,
this is a great start. You already did
yeah.
stuff.
If you're in Maine, reach out to Jeff. And if you're in Massachusetts, reach out to me. The reason being, every town's rules are a little bit different on if an ADU can work and what are the specifics. Like you've seen tonight, Jeff and I love nerding out about this. So we will look up the rules, look up your property, your specific zoning district, and see if it is viable. From there, that would be the time we'd say, hey, this might work. We know it sounds like your needs might work. Let's chat. Let's hear about what you need. I'll tell you about what I've learned about what's possible, and let's see if a feasibility might work. So that's always step one. Jeff and I are always here to chat. If it looks like a good option, you're like, hey, it is possible. Here are the rules. An ADU sounds like it could work on your property. We could take that next step and dive into a feasibility where we come and do a site visit. We look at all those pieces that we know impact cost, utilities, site, septic, water, all those pieces. We put our construction hat on, and then we generate for you a price specific to your property to say, hey, we know an ADU is going to work from a permitting standpoint. We know we can design something to fit your needs, but where's our budget and does the budget work? And from that feasibility, you'd go into our pipeline. And that's where I was saying somewhere between 12 and 10 months to move in.
And we, March 7th, so I think it's 2 weeks from today, we're having our feasibility study virtual event. So just like this, but we'll be going over strictly all things feasibility study and what's included and what that looks like for anyone that's interested. Is there a minimal property footage required in order to build an ADU?
Another one that's
where
very
you're located.
specific. Yeah, very specific to where you are. So shoot Jeff an email if you're in Maine. He'll look up your town, and I'll do the same in Massachusetts. Some towns do have restrictions. They say, hey, you need a minimum lot size of X, Y, and Z. A lot of towns, sort of in the second and third wave of ADU bylaws, are getting rid of that requirement because they recognize the need is there and you shouldn't be handicapped by the amount of square footage on your lot, as long as you're meeting setbacks and all the other applicable building code and planning codes.
Yeah, the state law by Maine says that all municipalities need to allow ADUs by right in residential zones. There are still some caveats with that, but definitely feel free to shoot Tim or I an email. There's our email address.
And kind of along the same lines, because it's municipality specific, but this was the first question that we got. So thank you to who asked it for sticking around. And I'm going to pair it with someone else's question, but The longer one is the City of Boston building inspector says current code limits ADUs to the quote envelope of existing house. We have a big lot with plenty of room for an ADU, but an 1880s house with limited envelope unsuitable for creation of an ADU within. Do you hear anything interesting about when Boston might expand to include building an ADU on ample lot space as opposed to within existing parameters? And someone else said, what is the statute on the Massachusetts proposed law on allowing ADUs statewide?
Yes. So great double questions to pair together, and a perfect segue from Jeff's talk about LD 2003, which is the main state law allowing ADUs by right. Right now in the Massachusetts legislature, there's the bond bill that's been moved forward by Governor Healy. And in there is 2 blurbs. And the goal is to allow ADUs by right across the state. So that would sort of level the playing field, like what's happening in Maine, requiring municipalities to do ADUs by right. The last set of language I read it before the comment period, which was up in February. So I'm not sure if it changed, but it did primarily reference attached or internal ADUs, like this person was talking about in Boston, not necessarily these detached ADUs like we see Jeff here in this photo. So to answer the second question, what do I know or what have I heard? It depends on who you ask. Some people are saying it's going to steamroll, it's going to get through, it's going to happen quickly. I've had other people tell me they think it's going to get voted in at the nth hour at the end of the legislative session. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I would say talk to your local senators, to your elected officials, both at the state level and also at the town level. Talk to your town council. When folks reach out to me and I look up their town and there's prohibitive or non-existent ADU bylaws, that's who I point them to, saying, hey, I've heard your story. It sounds like an ADU would work for you. You know, you're consolidating households. You're trying to plan for your parent or your loved one. This isn't allowed currently in your town. Go reach out to your town. Go tell them, because this is how change happens. And that's why we're at where we're at in Massachusetts. The governor recognizes that this housing crisis is real. And so ADUs is one part of the solution. So long-winded answer. For the Boston question, shoot me an email. And I'd be happy to chat more specifics about Boston. But hopefully that bill in Massachusetts does pass. There'll still be, like in Maine with LD 2003, several years for that to get disseminated and trickle down to towns. But there is hope.
This is a completely change of subject, but are all of our projects standalone ADUs? And do we experience remodeling of an existing home to add an ADU? I guess you kind of mentioned that a little, but yeah.
No, it's a great question. So some ADUs are retrofitting existing space, whether that's in a garage, in a basement, in an attic. We currently don't do that. We don't have the team and crews to do that. Our construction methodology is modular. So it is built in a factory on site. It is arrived and put on a foundation and connected to utilities. That can be done like in this photo, fully detached. It can also be attached, both directly to an existing house, or what we do a lot of as well is that ADU will be near the house and there'll be a connecting breezeway, a connecting deck, a connected covered walkway. We're doing one currently where their town allows them to just have a pergola. We'll need to lean in and research exactly what your building commissioner, your town is defining as an attachment, whether that is a shared roof, a shared wall with a doorway. There is some nuance there, but with our construction technology, we can be detached or attached, but we're not going in and retrofitting existing space. that's more suited for a local contractor. But we'd be happy again, Jeff or I, to look up the rules, see what's possible, and point you in the right direction.
Well said.
And are you putting solar panels on any of the ADUs you're building?
I'm not sure if we're allowed to spill the beans. This picture, we're getting a lot of use out of this. This is a great example of a roof pitch that could receive solar. If they put solar on this house, they'd most likely be net zero and they'd have no utility bills, which is awesome. We're looking to pilot how we can bring solar at low or very reduced cost to folks that build with us. Some people right now, after spending a chunk of change on a house, right away put solar on because they have the means and the desire to do so. Other folks planned for that expense down the road. So the financing hurdles, the cost right now is really mostly what I hear is what preventing people from doing that. But we're in the background always looking at alternatives and seeing how we could deliver fully net zero houses versus net zero ready homes.
Yeah.
This is going on the internet. I can't believe we just said that out loud. Okay. No, I'm just kidding with you. All right. It's a sneak peek. It's great.
We're working on it. We're thinking about it.
We're
We are thinking about it.
We're trying to solve all these issues, but
a lot of issues. Yeah. Do
not
you
enough hours in the day.
accessory? What was that?
It's not enough hours in the day, but
I know.
yeah.
Let's see.
I cut you off. I love
That's
these questions. These questions are fantastic.
I love doing the questions at the end. I just like keep going with it. Do you do accessory apartment builds? Which you already mentioned this, turning a room over a garage to an apartment with an external entrance. I guess you kind of already answered that one.
Yeah, I'd love to add a little nuance there. They brought up the word accessory apartment. Not every town calls an ADU an ADU. Some towns call them an accessory apartment. So if you're reaching out to your town or thinking about what's possible, there is some different nomenclature out there. Going back to our process, if we're doing an apartment above a garage, we're either tearing the roof off of an existing garage and adding our modular boxes on top, or we are building that garage and putting our modular box on top. We don't have the construction capacity to retrofit that existing space. Yeah. But the nuance there is, yeah, some towns call an ADU an accessory apartment or an in-law apartment. So if you're not sure what's possible in your town, Jeff or I could look that up or reach out to your local planning or building department and ask.
I got accessory residential use the other day in the zoning bylaw. Okay. And that was what they were calling an ADU. There's all kinds of terms for them.
Yeah. Sometimes there's like cottage language in there, but
cottage, yeah.
Hopefully one day there'll be sort of a standard, set of rules and set of terms. That way it can be more accessible for everybody.
We reached the end of questions.
We did it.
We did it.
There's always more questions.
Oh,
so
right. Yeah, there's always more
about them. Reach out to Jeff or I. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about and help you decide if maybe an ADU is right for you and point you in the right direction.
Yeah, and tomorrow I'll be sending everyone the links to the videos that I mentioned, some information about the HMLP, a link to that IRS form that Tim talked about, some graphics and things that relate to a lot of your questions that you had tonight that you can dive into. And like we keep saying, just reach out to Jeff or Tim and they can help you out.
Yeah, I know we sound like a broken wheel, but there are some specifics that we want to look up and give you good advice. But we hope tonight was helpful. Thank you for coming. It's late.
To March 7th.
March 7th.
March 7th.
Feasibility.
It'll be up tomorrow. It'll be on our social media pages. And you'll get an email eventually. So we hope to see you there too.
Excited to do the deep dive into feasibilities.
Yeah, the deep dive. Well, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.